Yeah. Well, first of all, we can, and I'm going to give you in a few minutes some examples of where we have done that. So don't be so quick to accept the premise. Mearsheimer is a very smart man and has much to teach us, and especially in that field of international relations, where most of it is really poor journalism. That's about it. He brings a much more refreshing, serious, analytical mind to it all. Let me take an example from the United States. And we can see it by going back for a moment to settler colonialism. I remember taking my children when they were younger to a small town in western Massachusetts. The name of the town, Old Deerfield. And in the town of Old Deerfield, they've done something very interesting. They've reconstructed the way houses looked in the colonial time, the early time, before the United States was a country, before we were independent, when we were an early new colony of Great Britain, okay? And if you walk through the town, very interesting, the way the houses inside and outside, you know, historians and archaeologists have reconstructed an old colonial village, a tourist attraction. So it's interesting, it's different, and I thought it might interest my children, which it did. But there was also something horrifying, because there are little signs in front, I believe, of each house. There's a little sign about what happened here in 1742, or whatever the year was. And the sign read like this: on the 18th of July, in the evening, the savages came and slaughtered 2 women and 4 children and a goat. The next house. Here, there was a hanging of savages that were caught stealing cows or horses. Next house. The savage, and I remember explaining to my children something that's very bizarre. The Europeans come 3,000 miles across the water from where they were born, from where they grew up in Europe, come 3,000 miles and enter the territory in which local people have been living for thousands of years, take their land, kill many of them, but they are the savages. Everything that happened in colonial New England was contextualized by the danger to the community posed by the evil other. Evil others have been part of American life from the beginning. You know, you had to make savages of these people, because if you didn't make them savages, what would they be? And the answer is victims. Victims of, they didn't come to Europe. Europeans came to them. They didn't take the land from the Europeans. The Europeans took the land from them. The Israelis have this problem. The Palestinians didn't go to Europe. The European Jews mostly came to that part of the world. And they had more money and they had more connections, blah, blah, blah. And so you have a problem here. For the Jew, again, I just want to make the parallel. For the Jews in Israel, how are they going to look at the Palestinians? They could, the way the Palestinians do, they could say, look how poor their income is. Look how bad their diet is. Look how early in life they die. Look at how ill they are. Look at how poor their homes are. Then they become maybe victims. But who would they be victims of? Israeli Jews. So it's impossible. You can't live with this. So they become savages. They're the ones, you're not threatening them, they are threatening you. And everything you're doing is defense. Everything the Israeli army does is identified by the letters IDF, the Israeli Defense. They are defending. They went crazy after October 7th because Hamas attacked them. They actually were victimized, just a few of them, 1,200, terrible. But there was, for that moment, the real, and it touched a nerve in these people. They feel victimized, even if they weren't hurt when those Hamas people attacked on the 7th, even if they weren't there, even if their family wasn't there. They felt the anger and bitterness of the Palestinian population, now expressed by Hamas, and we must and we have the right to defend ourselves, and we will destroy those who want to destroy us. Hamas is a very good target for them because Hamas actually has a position of getting rid of Israel. Just like there were some indigenous people in colonial New England who hated these Europeans. Given what the Europeans did, how could it be otherwise? And look at it too. In Ukraine, those people are dealing with the Russians as evil, dangerous, outside, savage threats. That's it. Otherwise, they would have to take seriously what the Russians are saying, which is, you attack the Russian-speaking people in the eastern part of Ukraine, and we're not going to let you do it, and we're not going to let you get NATO equipment and bombs and make it all. We're not going to let you do that. We're not. And it's a defense idea. And the Ukrainians do not want to understand themselves as having been maneuvered into a project of NATO. Again, that they don't want that. They want the Russians to be bad. And really all they have to hang on to is that the Russians did come first. The Russians crossed the border, and that's an issue, and that they have the right to bring that up. That's not the point. The point is, notice this procedure in which you feel yourself to be so close to evil and terrible that you have to put all of that on to somebody else. The Israelis know what the Palestinians think about Israel. They don't want Israel there. They feel abused by Israel. They feel their land was taken. And there's a lot of truth to all of that. But the Israelis cannot stay there and be the oppressor. So they have to do something. And what they've done, which is what those colonial people in New England did, was to make the other one savage. It's a little bit like, for the United States, we always needed an enemy. When we didn't have the native people to be the savages that we're in danger of, we fought a war against the colonial master, King George III, who dictated, we didn't want that, 1776, again in 1812. The British Empire, thinking itself the empire upon which the sun never sets, thought they could easily squash their own British people who had become a settler colony in North America. They made a terrible mistake. They lost the war in 1776, and they lost the war in 1812. But now to show you, after that war was lost, the British slowly, with lots of disagreement, came to a recognition. You cannot beat the United States into submission. You better work out a way that Britain can grow and develop and that the United States can grow and develop. And they did that. That was achieved. No more wars between the United States and Britain ever again. The last one, 1812. That's 200 years of no war between them, even though they had wars between them before. And during that period, the bulk of the 19th century and into the 20th century, both Britain and the United States grew, prospered, and developed. The United States grew, prospered, and developed more, faster. So in the end, the British colonial government and the little colony reversed their situation. And the little colony became the dominant economic empire, and Britain became a small, cold, wet island off the mainland of Europe, which is what it is now. So they went through an enormous, difficult role reversal, but they did not fight a war. They did not destroy each other in endless combat. So yeah, you can come to another solution. Whether the Chinese mean it or not, I don't know. I'm no expert on China, and I'm not pretending or have any interest in pretending that their motives aren't complicated and so forth. But I don't see them running around the world fighting wars. They're not provoking wars. The United States is provoking war in Taiwan. You can see Taiwan from China. You can't see it from the United States. What in the world is going on? Sending troops to Taiwan, sending military equipment. What are you doing? Again? Again? The United States must have believed in the days when Henry Kissinger and Richard Nixon opened up China and brought them into the WTO, that they could control how China developed. They couldn't, because colonialism is over. It's not coming back. It's done. But they didn't understand it. So China, with a goal of developing quickly, made some experiments. They tried the Soviet system. Government owned and operated the enterprise. They tried let's call it the Scandinavian system. Lots of government regulation, but basically private enterprise, private capitalism. And all that the Chinese did with their experiments, very practical, is they came up with a hybrid, an economy that is half public, owned and operated by the Chinese government, and half private capitalist enterprises, some Chinese, some Japanese, American, European, 50-50. Nobody's done that before. Russia was overwhelmingly, Soviet Union was overwhelmingly government-owned and operated. Britain and England, overwhelmingly private. And then mixtures before. But the Chinese are the first really big company to really kind of 50-50 and control the whole thing by a powerful government run by an even more powerful Communist Party. Okay, there are problems with this. There are injustices that are wrapped up. One can make all kinds of criticism, and I believe in social criticism, and it doesn't stop at China's door. But that's no excuse not to see what China has done. It has taken the largest population on the earth and pulled them out of poverty in one generation. No one has ever done that before. It took centuries to do that in Western Europe, North America, and Japan. Now, we have much to learn from that. And the Chinese seem willing, from what they say, and so far from what they do, to demand the right to develop their economy, but to be willing to sit down and work it out, as Britain and the United States were able to do in the 19th and the first half of the 20th century. So I don't think we need to be, Mearsheimer's might makes right. It's not always this, conflict. And if you have more battleships and you have more troops, you win. I mean, does that happen sometimes? Of course. Is it a necessity? No. Look, Europe suffered unbelievably in World Wars I and II. After World War I, they tried to develop a way to stop it, the League of Nations. That failed. After World War II, they tried again. This time they called it the United Nations. And while the United Nations has loads of problems, we haven't seen another world war. Okay, that's something. Let's see where we can go with that. One of the effects of that has been producing a generation, including today, that is very nervous about another war. It's difficult for the governments of Germany, France, Britain, Italy to mobilize to fight the Russians. There are a lot of people who don't want to go anywhere near there. They remember what their grandmother told them about what life was like during World War II or I. So these wars last a long time, leave deep scars, shaping politics for a long time. Israel is going to learn that lesson again in very painful ways as the Arab countries and the Muslim countries lead the way in finding opportunities to push back, to show their own people we are helping the Palestinians. We're not politicians who say one thing and do something else. And they will discover ways of working out your situation. And again, because the BRICS are now a larger, richer economic unit, there is the economic motive that is going to make more and more countries unwilling to do the conflicting, challenging, confrontational foreign policy that the United States pursues. And I think most of the world sees it, and I really think this is true, as the United States being a declining empire that is terrified about it, doesn't want to face it, needs to act out roles of the big, powerful, and then doesn't understand why it seems to make these terrible mistakes, losing all these wars, spending all this money. A Chinese leader once said some years ago, you come here and you don't understand the simplest thing to an American visitor. Do you know how much you spend on military? You call it defense. You spend more than the next 9 countries combined, which includes both Russia and China. All right? We don't. We use that money to lift our people out of poverty. So here's the problem for you, Mr. American, said this Chinese person. The world is racing to see which is the more successful foreign policy. The one that lifts everybody out of poverty, or the one that has a military base in 700 places around the world? The jury is out on that question, is not at all clear. But what is clear is that the Chinese have been able to devote their resources to building up their economy, and they've done so in a way that no one has ever done before, and that has caught the United States unprepared and unable to do very much about it. And yeah, I'm not Mr. Mearsheimer's need, and as I say, I respect him, I've learned from him, this is not at all a critique, but his need to see it as a dead end, that there is no solution, I believe he likes to use the term a frozen war, and that somehow Ukraine will end up being a frozen war with a frozen Russian army confronting a frozen NATO army. They can't move forward. They're frozen, And then he seems to think this will last forever. I don't believe that people on either side would tolerate this.